Yeah, welcome. And our icebreaker, if we could say our names, our pronouns, where we're joining from, um, and maybe if what your favorite section in a bookstore or the library is. And if you're more comfortable typing that out, you're welcome to do that as well. Um, then I can start. Um, my name is Karen Ugarte. I also work at the Chuchas, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm joining you from Van Nuys in San Fernando Valley, and my favorite section in a bookstore is actually at the checkout, like all the little knickknacks and the bookmarks and all that. Like I love the books, but I think the part that calls me the most is like where all the journals and knickknacks are. Yeah, and whoever's ready to go, you're welcome to start.
I can start. So my name is Eric, he, him. Um, I'm joining from Northridge, and my favorite part of a bookstore is like the clearance section. Right when you walk into like Borders and they have everything like stamped in like clearance sections and stuff like that, or like Barnes and Nobles. Like I love just sweeping through there and trying to see like things that I would never look at because they're in aisles that I don't go to, but they're just now out in the clearance section to see what strikes a whim.
Go ahead. Jorge Garcia. Um, Pronouns probably. I'm working on that. You know, this thing about fluidity, and I've had a lot of reactions, positive and negative, about the whole thing. Usually, I say my favorite pronoun is tu because that's the one I hear the most.
Not for me.
That's and bookstore sections probably. If there's an ethnic section, that's the one I'm looking for, and then history.
I'm Irene Garcia, her, she. Probably my favorite. I was a lit major in college, so I still go for fiction.
Welcome, Jorge and Irene. I'll go next. Welcome, everybody. My name's Rebecca, she, her, hers. And the favorite part of the bookstore is really hard because my favorite bookstore, I'm in it right now in Silmar. It's called the Chuchas. I'm right here. And the whole bookstore pretty much I would buy if I can, but I think my favorite part would probably be social justice books, or maybe even indigenous based books like the ones that are behind me. Those are the ones I'm drawn to the most. So that's me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christina Garcia also. Actually, the Garcia gentleman and lady just reminded me of my uncle and aunts who were based out of, my uncle passed about 2 years ago, but he's out of West Covina, and you just kind of look like him a little bit, Jorge. So it just kind of like brought me memories of him right now. I'm in Long Beach, California. I'm not a native Californian. I'm a native Chicagoan. I've been in Cali for 4 years. I confess I have not yet been up to Tia Chuchas, so I am actually looking forward to taking that little trip up there. I have ordered, and I did get my first shipment like 2 weeks ago or a week ago. So I'm brand new, and I plan to order all of your social justice books little by little. If I could just read faster, because I tend to just have them sitting here on my bookshelf, like, and then I've read like a couple chapters in each one, and then I just get so like excited about all of them. And anyhow, so that's my goal, to get up there hopefully soon and just meet you all, and then I can tell you which one's my favorite section. But it sounds amazing, and I'm an anti-Amazon person, so I am really excited that I found you guys here. My pronouns are she, her. Thanks.
Hello, I think I'll go next. Nice to see everyone and meet everyone. My name is Cynthia. I'm joining from San Fernando. I am, born and raised here, although I did spend some time in Santa Cruz for college. Um, I'm on the same boat as Christina and Rebecca. Like my social justice books, I love, but I have so many where I haven't even caught up with reading all of them. I'm just so I want them all, but I'm so glad I discovered the Chuchas. And ever since coming back from college. So yeah, it's my first time going there and picking up my books, which I'm glad to continue. I'm glad to be here.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Maria Rosales. I'm currently driving through the streets of downtown LA, but I'm from Compton. I found Tia Chuchas through Instagram during my Christmas shopping, and I'm very glad that I found them because I was very, I would always shop through in Barnes and Nobles, and I'm glad I found like an independent bookstore that has a meaningful meaning in our culture. And and my favorite part of the library is I don't have AC at home. I never grew up with it, so every time just walking into a fresh library room was the best feeling and would set the tone to my studying or reading or whatever I was doing there. So thank you so much for having me here.
I'll pop my camera on for a second, just so hopefully it doesn't kick me off again. So I apologize for keeping it off. My name is Kyla. I'm joining you guys actually from all the way out in Michigan. I've loved that you have had to move this virtual so that I'm able to take part, since I know once you guys get back to in person, I won't be able to join you, but I'm enjoying it now. And pronouns are she, her, hers. I think, so they have an independent bookstore near us where the staff has like a staff picks table, and they will write out like little note cards about why that book is their favorite or what they enjoyed about it. So I've always really appreciated that because, I don't know, it's just a little bit more personal to see how other people have responded to books. And as much as I love social justice books, when I get to break out of that, I go for historical fiction. So.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And I guess we can get started on the book. I'm going to just, I guess, start off just by posing and opening up with a question. And, if the question calls you, please feel free to share. And just, I guess the question I'm going to start with is, what was your biggest takeaway? And we can either start with the introduction, or if you have like a biggest takeaway from the whole book, whichever question suits you better.
I can start. I work in software design, and one of the most interesting things here was that a lot of the principles we use inside of like a corporate environment are being applied here. So it's great to see that thesis pans out, right, and how you organize groups. That was the biggest takeaway for me reading through it. It's like, oh, I'm really familiar with a lot of the stuff a lot of the workshops that are introduced. I had a lot of fun reading through this because it's the same principles, just by different names. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway is how much they aligned with how giant corporations get their people moving, right? Is the same functions work outside of that field, even when there isn't like this huge or a self-negotiated salary attached to it, right? Like those same principles can still apply to people inside of communities through other motivators.
I'm really thrown off by not being able to see our little picture.
I know. I don't know how to do that.
Okay. One of the things that struck me about this book and made it was a hard book to get into for me because I don't read a lot of fiction. I got hooked on history, well, starting with juvenile and history-based fiction, but then moved quickly because I had a brother 2 years older, so I could read his stuff and piss him off every time I was reading one of his books. But not reading much fiction, and even less science fiction. So this thing about science fiction was really hard for me to get into. And then you're right. You're talking about, principles of organizing and so on. But the constant use of the analogy with nature, that was another way of looking at it. And it took me till, I don't know, till I got into, I would say 75, 100 pages before I said, okay, this is a metaphor. Let's go with it. See what we can get out of it. And it turned out to be a much more interesting book than I thought it was going to be when I was struggling through the first pages and all the terminology. Still got questions about how I'm like a mushroom or oak tree roots or so on.
I enjoyed a lot of it, but something that just jumped out at me, and it's not the first time I've heard it, but I think we need to be reminded all the time that when she says never a failure, always a lesson. And I think if we can, I used to be a teacher, so if we can teach children that, or anybody, that, yeah, that eliminates one thing, something you have to do. Now that you know that that doesn't work, where do we go from here? What's the next question, and going forward? So that was a good thing for me to be reminded of. Next.
Yeah. I think for me, something that I think is done really beautifully throughout the book is the constant connection to like how small actions and connections create complex systems. And like she opens up with that, and it's just like weaved very nicely throughout the whole book. I really like that she recognizes the impact of capitalism. Um, and also another thing that stood out to me that I felt like, oh, like this is what happens at the book club is that she talks about, well, she defines like emergence and emergent strategy, and also mentions how it has to be in conversation with others. Like it's not something that you can do alone, that it's in conversation with others. And I was like, oh, that's what's happening here today at the book club, and in spaces like this, that's what's happening. Yeah, so those were the things that stood out to me the most from like the first part of the book.
I like how she brings in different learning lessons, like what Irene, you were saying about there's not like classes, there's only like there's lessons. That stuck out to me a lot too, is that as people we had to give ourselves that grace to learn those lessons and expand ourselves. And I think I like how she talks that as an individual, you do that, but it's also for a greater cause. Like it's like as us that we need to work together to do a bigger picture kind of thing. And I like how she brings in her teachers, like Grace Lee Boggs is one of the teachers that she learned from in Detroit. And yeah, the thing about like dialogue and how we need to, I guess, be open-minded to change in our own self. Like, so I think that kind of lesson has been sticking out to me a lot, is like having that ability to adapt and change, just not as an individual, but also like as a group when you're organizing. And I really appreciate that she brings in different examples of groups that are organizing, like the Zapatistas. And I think that what you said to Erica about like things having the same kind of message but maybe a different term for it, I feel like that happens too, like when she's talking about leaders and like how in Zapatistas everybody covers their face because it's not just about that one person, it's about like the group. That's like she's talking about that too in her terms in those lessons. And it's just really cool to see how these kind of lessons like more than one group of people and organizers have thought and tried to do those things. So I think that sticks out to me a lot.
Yeah, I know that at least one of you has said already that you kind of have a lot of questions. And it kind of made me think about like if you could ask, you know, Adrienne Maree Brown a question, like what would that question be?
Good question. You know, she talked about Occupy Wall Street, right? And how there are a lot of emotions around it, and then I wrote it here. I said, you know, so what happened? Did anything change? And it seems to me it got worse. But then she also talks about, you know, capitalism is working the way it's supposed to, right? This is a capitalistic system, and or what is it? She wrote someplace too that the unease of living in the United States as a person of color. So, you know, are we supposed to look for only small advances, or I don't know. I guess I'm not as optimistic as she is, because you say, you know, what's changed? You know, even with this past summer, we saw the disparity when of the way the white people were treated at the Capitol, and we know that had it been one of us, you know, it would have been all over, right? Anyway, so I'm sorry about the pessimism, but yeah.
I think I would agree with you, right? That I think that in many aspects, like when we talk, like when we look at, like at least in the latter parts of the book, where she's talking about the tools for emergent strategy facilitation. She talks about even just like getting together and like setting an agenda, orienting a group of like 5 to 15 people can take an hour and a half and things like that, right? And it's like all of these incremental changes that the author wants to push towards organically takes so much time, right? And it feels that some of the situations that we're dealing with require something to like really focus the group, right? Like it doesn't allow for this kind of organic discovery of like, well, what ought to be the best solution, right? How do the 15 of us feel about the problem at hand, and what do we think ought to be the first, you know, things we discuss, right? Let's spend the first 2 hours setting the agenda for our conversation, right? Like I don't know, right, if like that satiates the nature of like of the urgency of the moment, right? Even if it is like well-intentioned and drives to results, right, over time, right? I don't know if that meets the moment is kind of like what I'm getting at, right? And I think it's kind of the same thing, right? What you were saying, so at least what I was digesting.
You know, I think one of the things, and you know, when we read something, we're reading it in light of our own experiences. But um, what I was getting out of this, and once I got into it, said, okay, go with this imagery, go with this metaphor, and thinking back of experiences, uh, 67, 68, 69, was involved as a student at Fresno State in what we openly called the Third World Coalition. It was basically, you know, the Afros and Chicanos, because the Asians didn't want to participate. There was one Koreana that participated, and that was it. And we spent a lot of time. And when we finally formed the Ethnic Studies Department, Dick Keyes, the chair, and this is with faculty that were hired, and I was hired into that faculty. He tried starting meetings by saying, look, we have 2 to 3 hour meetings, and the first hour and a half are basically everybody trying to prove that they're the baddest MFer here. So I'm declaring you all the biggest, baddest MFers in the world. Now let's go to work on our agenda. It didn't work. People still gotta posture, gotta pose, and I think part of it is, I think she drives at this with Emergence. We're so used to talking and responding best to people who agree with us. But the point of this talking is to also listen there won't be an emergence if it's just two people taking the same onda and pushing it. That's not an emergence. And what it involves is what some of the writers, I was having a hard time with this, but I just finished another book where they talked about the conversions, where you have your positions, the other person has theirs, and it's not so much of the meeting turns out to be you're unconsciously or unconsciously trying to dominate it and push your point of view, your ideology, whatever. But the point of that exchange is to modify both positions or all of the positions so that you come towards what emerges is that which will carry you forward out into action. And that's really a difficult part, because we have the other model that we're so used to getting into. The moment somebody starts talking, say oh, he's one of those, or he's with them, and you're saying, what are they saying? What are they proposing? What is the idea? And it almost goes back to like the Hegelian notion of the negation. Now, everybody hears negation says negative, criticon. No, it's putting forward an idea or position. Somebody puts forward a counter position which negates, usually not the whole thing you're talking about, but part of it. And out of the synthesis, you bring forth the truth of both positions, if you will, and you're ultimately moving towards truth with a lowercase t, not capital truth. That's something else. But the truth of that situation and what you should be doing and how you should be going, and I think that's what emergence is here. Not the emergence of one dominant position, which is unfortunately the way an awful lot of us, it's hard. It's hard, this other process of where you say, okay, what they're saying, I need to modify my position or my thinking, but that is a continual process. And that's to me what the emergence is.
I'm curious, I feel like there's certain things, consciousness raising, like with the idea of it not being open to hearing other people and working with other people, so it's not about egos. And I'm just curious what y'all think about, like, how to get it to be that way, that that consciousness raising about, it's not it's like we kind of thing. And I think that that kind of consciousness is also put in practice. So like being open to having dialogue so we can change, like open dialogue and having like maybe hope, not hope, or being okay with doing experiments in a way, because she said something somewhere in the book about, like, we don't have an example of, like, so like, let's say doing the science fiction in the future, it's envisioning a future that we don't know of, so but we know what doesn't work, and we've tried over these years, and it was built, like people have been doing activism for a long time, and there was lessons learned, and there's also some there's a lot of gangs too, so I think it's like a movement building in a way, and it's not like a romanticizing of an individual so much, but like there's a bunch of individuals working together to make try to make a better outcome, even if it's an experiment. At least people are trying in a way, because we don't have those answers to what a fully just world where people can be their authentic self together. We don't have that as much, so that's why it's important to imagine and to have dialogue for change, and like keep working towards like those experiments of the better future, while also acknowledging and honoring the past and learning from the past too. But
Yeah. I would just to chime in here, even though I'm in full disclosure, I haven't read the book. I have actually been following Adrienne Maree Brown for a while and have heard, many of her podcasts and interviews and things like that. So her philosophy is very much about creating something new, right? And I think that's what you spoke to, Jorge. And coming to the table with the ability, with the awareness almost that you're here to go through an evolutionary process that hasn't been gone through, right? So, where we actually disarm ourselves and each other by being vulnerable and saying, no, we haven't done this before. Like, we want to see what a new world would look like. And I think going back to like I think something you said, because I've been in activism spaces my whole life as well. So has my dad. We come from a family of activists. And I've seen what you mentioned, Jorge, like where the ego takes over, and then before you know it, the whole meeting is about, oh, let's do it this way. My way is better. But me, 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 me. Um, I think that speaks to a core, the core of we are missing healing justice spaces, I would argue. Like we're very much, and the reason that, at least in my view, that has manifested is because as individuals of color, a lot of times we haven't had spaces to heal, or we haven't gone through the process of taking ourselves to heal so that we can actually show up as better human beings, right? Even in our activism, unfortunately, our activism has had a lot of toxicity in it, and where we're kind of like playing oppression Olympics, or we're playing into our egos because we haven't actually taken ourselves through that process of radical healing. And what does that look like to bring that to our activism? And so I know Adrienne comes from that philosophy, and she is inviting us to sort of lay down our guard, lay down our weapons, lay down everything we think we know, right? And start new. And that's the hard part. And because it's like, how do you do that? Like, most of us, I feel like I don't know how to do that. Like, and so being willing and able. The other part I would say is, I forgot my last train of thought, but oh yeah, back to, I think, what is it, Eileen? Is it Eileen? I don't know.
Irene, no?
Irene, I'm sorry. Irene, I think you spoke to like um pessimism, and pessimism, I feel like I've felt it in many times of my life. Like I'm just, I've just had to learn with, like, sometimes I'm gonna be very pessimistic, and that's okay, because the state of affairs right now is one that just, you just want to kind of crawl under your blanket and be like, F the world, like. But then, because we have that spirit of activism, it's like I continue to be called in, like, okay, make it better, create something. And I think from where I'm standing, I have seen this sort of emergence, this wave of more people stepping into their activism right now. And that's inspiring me. Like, folks asking questions like, what is white supremacy? Wait, what's internalized oppression? How am I breaking that down? Like, whoa. And so I'm seeing like 2020 brought awareness into our collective consciousness. And that gives me fire, like, to like, oh shit, I got work to do, because there's tools to be passed on, right? Like, there's stuff, knowledge to share. And so anyhow, that makes me excited.
I think along those lines about how do we check our ego at the door, right? And how do we come together? In the book, she has a section called the group agreements, and they lay out like really like bullet points on how you bring, and how like the agreements that the individuals who are at the meeting come to, right? Things like the acronym WAIT, why am I talking, right? Listen from the inside out, or listen from the bottom up, right? So there's all these tenets that she does that allows the participants to disarm themselves. If, like, one of the bullet points is, if you value the process more than the outcome, right? Because the process of engaging in that dialogue is what is going to bear good fruit at the end, right? If you are meaningfully engaging with the person on the other side, and I guess leading with listening and leading with empathy, right? You will ultimately arrive, you will emerge, a solution will emerge from there. But I think for me, it just brings me back to like the point of like, I don't know how we get people to do this in the face of like competing capitalist interests, right? Where like my neighbor is like, well, I'm good enough, dude. I don't want to sit down with you and like go through this exercise and have a conversation with all these bullet points and these are the rules of engagement. Like, I don't want to do that. No, like I'm good in my apartment. I'm good in my house, right? Like, I don't know how we incentivize the individuals to be part of a larger group or a larger collective, right, in the face of capitalist pressures. That way, that forces to compete, for homes and forces to compete for resources on a day-to-day basis.
Reading through this, one of the things that kept occurring to me is it's complicated. She's trying to, in some way, to simplify it, a very complicated, and I get that sense from her. She's dealing with the complicatedness, but trying to say, okay, there's a down to earth, simple path through this. And I would say I look at Tia Chucha's, and I think it's an agent of emergency, because she talks about the metaphors again, the oak trees. It took centuries for these trees to develop, the redwood, centuries, and the root system is there. And then and we see and different people are doing different things that fit into this. The whole question of the indigeneity, we have a long history, a history that unfortunately we many times do not know, or do not know a lot of, or we have misinformation. I mean, it drives me crazy when people will do things like, well, I'm from Michoacan, therefore I am what Purépecha. I said, no, it wasn't that simple. You can't just pick a location, say I'm from there and this is what I am, because people have always moved, interacted, intermarried. My family's both sides from Jalisco, and I'm reading history of Jalisco, and the way that was, on the coast, a center for expansion to the north. And when things got too bad in the north, they pulled back settlers who would come in from Tlaxcala. So you have this infusion of several hundred Tlaxcaltecos at one point, plus the settling, wherever the Spaniards went, they took already, what they considered Christianized, civilized, but, más o menos natives with them. So, we're a mix of indigenous peoples and traditions and languages, and yet people do this snapshot. Well, this is where my ancestors came from at that particular time. That was the conditions. But see, it's real complex. But that's part of who we are. That's part of what we have to draw on. And then you have the contemporary realities. And as you were saying, you want to move things, and we're here. We've seen a lot of this lately. We're here arguing about how nasty this current administration has been to us, but there are people saying, I mean, an old friend of mine, we're talking, and he finally just said, hey, my family's doing great. Our investments, our, stock is doing fine, so I don't care about it. I said, I couldn't believe it. Our individual situation is good, so a la fregada con everybody. Oh, and how do you reach somebody like that? Well, finally, with this fellow, I just say, okay, this is where he is, and ni modo. I didn't think he was that way. So it's a multifaceted struggle that revolves around our past, our present, and then that notion of the future, where we're going. That's one thing I began to appreciate in the book about visionary fiction. I don't think science fiction is the only visionary fiction, but fiction fiction is almost redeemed here as far as I'm concerned. I used to well,
We can agree on this.
I know. I used to tell a friend of mine who was an English professor, I said, hey, that stuff you read. He says, what stuff? I said, that stuff is not real. You go, what? I said, fiction. I don't know how many times I got him like that, because to him, he was in that real world of fiction. And so we used to have fun. You know, you gotta have some fun with it too, you know. As the line from Zoot, so don't take the pinchy place so serious sometimes.
Christina wrote, I'm just gonna read it out loud. It is a bit heartbreaking when I counter folks like that. However, that begs the question, maybe those are not our people. Maybe we talk to folks who are eager to learn and wanting to roll up their sleeves. We encounter, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, like, cause it is overwhelming, huh? Like, maybe it is, oh, I don't know. Cause then it's like you're with the talking to the, or singing to the choir thing. But yeah, it is overwhelming how many people, because I'm thinking, like, I was thinking, like, how do you, I kind of was like torn, because I think there's people out there that are never gonna change, and maybe like those kind of people, like, not waste your time on. That's what I was thinking. So but then there's other people that maybe we can work with in a way that we don't necessarily always agree, but there's the other people that maybe just focusing efforts, um not on those people that are never going to change, but like people that we could make some kind of change with. So, you know, yeah.
Makes a reference to ants in the book, and they talk about how like every ant has an individual function. They are individuals, right? And I empathize with like the heartbreak that is like heard when you hear the vitriol that is said, you know, by the right. But I think that in our collective, there are individuals who are willing to stand at the front of that vitriol, right? I do think it is unreasonable to ask that all individuals face that vitriol at the same time, right? But there are likely those among us who are willing to say, I will be at the forefront. I am willing to engage with the most heinous, right? And do my due diligence, right? Because ultimately, I think what she is calling for here in these books is that the realization that we are all one organism, whether they are the ugliest among us, right? So that individual, right? Because ultimately the decision that the collective makes is not one that is oppressive to any one group. It is one that is ultimately liberating to all people, right? So even those who don't agree with us or aren't in the in-group at the onset will ultimately still be beneficiaries of the final decision, right? Because the intent is never to oppress, right? The intent is always to liberate, right? But so I think it's not about like, hey, like they're not our people, so we don't right? Maybe that's just not our role, right? In this struggle, right? Our role is elsewhere, and that, you know, it is important to identify those who are willing, right, to bear that weight, because it is a different part of the struggle. So I took that from like the ant analogy that she gave us.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. I guess like change happens, and other people can use their strengths and interests to make the change happen in the field that they are in a way. Like some people are really good at talking to politicians and working that space. Other people really would hate doing that stuff. So, but like just having more, I guess, places is like changing different as we, and I think that's what's been going on, is like there's been the change happens in different has to happen in different layers at the same time. Like some people are really are yeah, like so that's how I think about that's a good point.
Yeah, I think I'll just also add that I see this as a journey, right? And it is a part of like it is this ant work that you're referencing, Eric. And it's, you know, my comment is not so much to omit people as it is to sort of understand that some people are not there yet, or they're just not, you're not going to move them, right? And so we sometimes can't, I know I've gotten frustrated where you're like, you know, but that, like, and just understanding that that person is where he or she is at or they're at right now in this particular moment in time. This is a spectrum. And perhaps I move on to the folks that are eager and willing and ready. but that doesn't mean we cancel those folks out. That means that those folks will hopefully somehow eventually catch up and or play another role, right? Like you all already mentioned. But it does speak to this, like, I think we have to acknowledge, right? Like the emotional toll sometimes that takes on, like, that's why I mentioned the heartbreak, like, because those are I do see those as still my people, like in terms of like humanity, but perhaps I'm just not going to reach them right now. And I have to be okay. That's, again, that goes back to me. How am I soothing my spirit to understand that I need to be okay with that, because there is this other group of people that is yearning for my attention, is yearning for those tools that we have to be able to pass on. So I struggled with that in the past, and I think it's like just age has made me be like, okay, Christina, like you don't need to like change everybody's mind in that particular moment. You move on. So that's where I'm at, but certainly not canceling anybody. And just, yeah, collective liberation is what we strive for.
Christina, since you are an activist, I was asking myself, so what do we expect of other people? Christina.
I mean, I think also that so I see everything from a new lens. I'm a different kind of activist now. I do a lot of stuff on online now. Whereas before I was literally in the like the, just running around, the little ants knocking doors, right? Like sitting in those meetings in the town halls and all of that. So my activism is really different now, and my activism looks like um, really making myself available for very specifically for Black, Indigenous, and or other women of color that are ready to walk into dismantling their own internalized oppression, that are asking those questions about themselves and are saying, why have I dealt with assimilation my whole life? What is this thing? It has eaten away at my soul, and I don't even know who I am right now. Like, where are my cultural roots? Why is it that I didn't grow up speaking Spanish? Why is it that my parents didn't teach me? Because they were protecting themselves against racism. That's why. And so those folks that are ready and willing and asking all the questions, that's what I'm doing, holding space for those groups and having those conversations. I now want them to go inward and do the unpacking, because when you do the unpacking, you become radical, and you're like, whoa, like you have a different lens through which you operate that then compels you to use your voice in all spaces. And that's what I want, like to really really like shift consciousness and radicalize each woman and femme of color that is willing and ready to listen, because then I know that she and they will go to every space and be like, hey, true to power, hey, excuse me, that's wrong. No, right? Why don't we have a woman of color on this panel? Why aren't there any Black people in this room? Like, that's what I want, because that's justice to me, and that needs to happen.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, and thank you all for sharing. We're getting sort of close to the end, so I just wanted to open it up for anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak, and no pressure, of course. But if you want the opportunity, like I said, we're kind of winding down to the last about 25 minutes.
I'd like to share something. I think just, hearing all of your words, I've just kind of been, I guess, formulating my own thoughts. And with what has been brought up, it kind of made me think about, I don't remember what specifically the author mentioned, but in there she mentioned like, whatever like you're into and your part in activism can look different for everyone. Like, I could be a writer, I could be an artist, I could be, someone who goes to those town hall meetings and who offers those online spaces. But it's up to you to, in whatever way you can, to open up that avenue And I think that also kind of puts the pressure off of ourselves when thinking of like, how am I going to reach this person that seems so, you know, shut down and like not receptive to these ideas, you know. And I feel like if we're using the example of activism through like paintings or like artwork, I feel like you're putting those thoughts and ideas in that one medium and then sending it off, and it will ultimately reach an audience that is looking to find material that like that, or comes across someone who maybe might not have thought of things in that way, and can then kind of open up their eyes in their own time. And I feel like that also speaks to people taking their own responsibility and looking inward. So I feel like that's one way where I think about, or it might seem like something small, like if I do a painting, how that can reach other people. And that might be a way someone works inwardly, and how we might be able to reach people who we might have like never thought we could reach. I don't know. I feel like I'm not explaining myself as like best as I can, but that's one way where I was thinking, and like that's where like the discussion brought my thoughts generally. Yeah.
I think that totally makes sense. I think it's a matter of not just meeting people where they are, but meeting them in a way that resonates with them, and that speaks to them. And that for everybody, you know, as far as skill set, that's different, but then also interest and like what's going to speak to somebody, it's always going to be different. And I think that art is so powerful for so many people, and having people who are able to, you know, communicate such profound ideas in a way that's going to speak to someone through art is just as critically important, you know, as being able to be like Christina and have these, you know, conversations with women, and helping them unpack the things that, you know, their own trauma and their own internalized, you know, biases and things like that. And so I've just really been sitting here and listening to all of you guys and be just really appreciative, because as a white woman, I'm constantly looking for, you know, where is my role in a way that is an appropriate amount of support, as opposed to, you know, that very thin threshold between, you know, co-opting and speaking over and speaking in front of, and trying to find a way that, you know, speaks with and supports, as opposed to, you know, speaking over. And that's what I think, you know, texts like this are really important, you know, just to help me recognize the different ways that I can use my position, I can use any privilege that I have, I can use any voice that I have to uplift, as opposed to speak over. And I think that being able to hear just how everybody else is doing this work has been really important to hear. So thank you very much, all of you guys, for sharing, you know, how you are manifesting this.
Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna, I guess, start to wrap up with final thoughts and book recommendations. And if you're interested in facilitating, to let us know. And we'll make sure you're contacted by Andrea, our program coordinator, who organizes the Social Justice Book Club. But I invite you on. So, any final thoughts or something you want to leave the group with?
Yes, our author talks about uh, being a pleasure activist, and how you know, we need to dance and sing and talk to each other, enjoy the fruit of conviviality. So I want to thank you all for helping me grow my pleasure today. This is really beneficial to me. Thank you.
I think for at the end here, it's for me the last thing that one of the last things I took away from the book is in the section for mediation. And it's one that I guess I hadn't really noticed. It says sometimes we talk to move away from the truth. And she's talking about listening, feeling to what's being said, and not just listening to the words that are being said. I think that's very important right now, particularly that most of our interactions have moved to digital type of interactions. So that is something that I took to heart right about here. Because it was something that I feel it is a sensory thing that we've lost when we're no longer in the same room, right? We no longer feel the intensity of some of the conversations sometimes. So yeah, sometimes we talk to move away from the truth. I thought was a big takeaway for me that I'm definitely going to sit with.
I think I've just one thing that Cynthia mentioned that really resonated was it brings peace to me that you said it's a way to take the pressure off of us, right? That this idea that yes, there are different ways of activism and different roles for everybody. So, and the way that you brought art into it, right? It's absolutely it's another medium, and so I just kind of try to hold that it's all of our roles and it's none of our job. Like right, it's it takes the pressure off of me, and so that I could be a little bit more focused.
There's several times when the issue of meditation, whether it's through yoga, Buddhism, or whatever, walking in nature, spending time, withdrawing, whatever. But self time and working on on yourself. That's a hard one, and it's also incredibly important. And this is where, once again, it kind of comes together where the artists, the poets, the painters, the theatro people, the musicians, these are people who can help us with that process of looking in and developing oneself interiorly, and the quiet time when you're not doing, you're not we used to speak of active and passive. Active when I'm doing things, and passive when things are being done to me or something is coming at me. And you need that balance. You need to have, not that it's ever going to be 50-50, because usually we go off the deep end one way or the other and then try to get back. But it has to be that both the exterior, the interior, the interaction with each other, the interaction with oneself. And I say that's where a lot of the people who sometimes are blasted for not being real political are actually doing a very important political work.
That reminds me of a book about doing your own internal work in a way, and it's called Mastery of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz, and he talks about being an artist to your life. And I think that being an artist to your life is like cultivating your own happiness, so that you could be the better version of yourself, so that you can be energized to do to know how to check your ego, and step back when you need a break, because she talks about that too, is taking sabbaticals, and nurturing your spirit. Like I think those are really great points that you all have said, and I really appreciate you all coming today, and Christina, I really appreciate you speaking and being vulnerable, and I think that's very beautiful to be to share with us. I think that's important that we hold space together, and because like letting things out is also healing. Letting things out through art is also very healing. So I agree with what you all were saying. So I really appreciate everybody here, and keep rest, and keep cultivating your happiness around you, and make things fun, and for yourself. so that we can be better versions of ourselves and having the very beautiful, keep living our beautiful lives. You know, the process is beautiful. So yeah, so I guess with that, I just wanted to amp up. The next book is gonna be about activists and artists. So she calls it activistas. So people who've been working in East LA during the 90s, and how they learned from like the zapatistas, and how they learn from each other through community spaces that are not existent today. So it's kind of like I think this book relates to what the importance of having community spaces, like the Chuchas and the ones from the past too, and how it brings people together to create and have create art, and but also like spaces to have these kind of conversations so that we can do some organizing and activism and learn from each other. So she talks about that, and she's she's one of the members who gets that, and she talks about how she works with the music, the Son Jarocho people, and the activism that comes out of that too. So it's a beautiful book. I really recommend it. I read it already. It's next month's book. So with that said, does anybody have any ideas for another book besides that one? For another occasion.
Rick, I'm not sure if you already mentioned, you might have already mentioned, I had to step away for a second, but that Luis did had a conversation with Marta about the ties in her book. So if y'all are interested, the video's up on YouTube and we can link it on the chat if you want to get an idea of what it's about before committing.
And yeah, so
Rebecca, you mentioned you were referring to a book just now.
Yes. The Chicanaos, I forgot the title. What was the title? It's the one with Marta Gonzalez, Chicanaos Activistas, I think. Right, Karen? Chicanaos Activistas. I'm gonna type it in the chat, but it's available, I think, at the Chucha, I'm pretty sure.
No, I thought there was some other book you were referencing. Just
the other one is called the Mastery of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz. Really talks about how we're conditioned to see a certain reality of ourselves, but it's like getting to challenge those things so that we don't fall for and being our worst enemy kind of thing. So it's like a self-help book. It's called Mastery of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz. And that's also a book that I got at the Chuchas.
Yeah, well.
But yeah, but if y'all hopefully we see y'all next what's it called? Book club. Book club month. So but yeah, nice to see everybody. Does anybody have questions or before we wrap it up?
I found a book. So I haven't read it yet. It's called Direct Action. The subtitle is Protest and the Reinvention of American Radicalism. But it's basically an overview. Direct Action examines like the ACT UP and Occupy Wall Street, the Black Lives Matters have catalysts change the world. So I don't know, I've not read it. I picked it up while I was reading another book. But it is like a social justice book, so I don't know if you guys were interested. But yeah, that's it.
Cool. Thank you, Eric. Are you on the email list by any chance?
I'm not, no, but I'll send you my email right here.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, we'll hopefully keep in touch. Sometimes people, you don't have to commit to this, but people sometimes when we propose a book, it would be cool if they would facilitate the conversation, but if you can, it's okay. But we can keep in touch with that. Thank you, Eric, for that suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. I just found the link to Martha's and Luis's video, so I'm gonna go ahead and share that with you.
How do we save this? How do I save that, Karen?
So I think you can highlight it and copy it from there, or okay. you can click it and it'll open the web page for you.
Is that right there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Copy. You want to
Yeah.
copy it? There it is. Copy. Okay, got it. I copied it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Yes, so thank you all for joining us, and like Rebecca said, we hope to see you all next month.
Okay,
in
February.
Have a nice weekend.
You too.
You too.
Thank you.
All
Bye
of
bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.